tells us all about it. So, Kate, what's going on in theatre in Melbourne at the moment?
I have a couple of shows to talk about this week. Is God Is the first by Aleasha Harris, an African-American playwright, and it's produced by Melbourne Theatre Company and Sydney Theatre Company in a collaboration. Runs until 15th of July. I'll start by saying there is horror in this house. Well, there's actually horror in two houses in Is God Is, the award-winning play by Harris. Twin sisters, Anaya, played by Henrietta Inyonam Amovar, and Racine Masigo Pizzo, please excuse my pronunciation, actors. They lived in southern USA in cruel foster care after their brutal father intentionally set fire to their mother, played wonderfully by Cecily Stovell, and caused horrific injuries to these toddler twins. These two believe their mother, who they call God, known as She in the program, died that day in the fire until 18 years later, in the present, she summons them to a nursing home where she lies dying in a wonderful staging and sends them on an epic quest to wreak vengeance on their father, who's played by Kevin Copeland. So following God's instructions, aka the mother, Anaya and Racine go first to interrogate their father's former lawyer, a drunkard called Chuck Hall, played by Patrick Williams. Then they travel to a northern state where they find their father's current wife, Claire Chihambakwe, and 17-year-old twin sons Riley, played by Grant Young, and Scotch, Darius Williams. So the very tall Amevor, I think that's correct, and pocket-sized Pizzo make eccentric and clearly non-identical twins and effectively create a very intimate symbiotic relationship between these damaged sisters. Amevor brings an awkward, lovable, fragile quality to the more sensitive Anaya, while Pizzo is a firecracker as the bolder but more violent Racine, which you will see in the play. The violence the pair perpetrates is stylised on stage and abstracted, so there's no blood or fake or real here, but the sense of menace and horror is palpable. Meeting both of these twins' alarming parents explains some of Anaya and Racine's dysfunction and this escalating trail of carnage. And Harris's play is co-directed by Zinzi Okenyo and Shari Sebens, has echoes of Greek tragedies and also tilts ironically at cowboy movies. And Harris's writing incorporates self-narration for many of the characters that sounds a bit like complex stage directions, and it's combined with character backstory, so we get a little bit more information in addition to the dialogue. But the dialogue crackles with this southern US idiomatic language and a rhythmic, repetitive, poetic style. It's a bit reminiscent of beat poets. Wonderful set, a plywood house that the actors manipulate by opening doors and windows and shutters and changes locations. The opening scenes are compelling, from our first encounter with the sisters and their scarred bodies, that's part of their costume, to the almost religious revelation of their mother, surrounded by candles, propped up in a bed with tubes keeping her alive. And Stovall's performance as the formidable mother is edgy, sometimes comical, but very vocally dexterous. So, however, in the latter half of the production, the direction lacks the balance of those early scenes, the first couple of scenes, that I think are the most successful. And there are some awkward scene changes, and some of the stylized violence feels contrived, but it challenges the audience with style and content, and it certainly reflects its origins in African-American America specifically. The Cinderella Musical, is an Australian musical running till the 18th of July, comedy theatre. It's plenty of potential, but the most important thing about it, or exceptional thing about it, is musical theatre performers, including Lucy Durack, Verity Hunt-Ballard, Matt Lee. But this star power doesn't disguise the limitations of the production as an adaptation of the Cinderella story, with its lead character in this iteration, Ella, played by Brianna Bishop, very beautifully too. She sings well and she has a perky sort of disposition. The conceit of the production is a young girl's reading the Cinderella story and reframing it as she goes. And Dean Murphy and Pip Mushin's book attempts to update the fairy tale to make it a modern commentary on class and money and power and corrupt monarchy. But unfortunately, their book is I have to say, undercooked and lacking a coherent narrative through line. And the original Cinderella has a very clear plot and characters and relationships. So if you're going to mess with that, there needs to be a very strong spine to the revamped story. And this adaptation could have included the contemporary issues in the original story, but that would require a much more skillful and cunning plotting of the original. Dialogue's also a bit trite and cheesy, with too many glib lines and modern lingo such as, hey, that's great, okay, or fine, that clash with the period of the production and its characters and the social structures and even the costumes. John Foreman and Anthony Costanza have written the music and lyrics, and it has a few singable songs, but overall the music, I'm sorry to say, is derivative and the lyrics are predictable. I really want to be positive about this, but perhaps it just needs a whole lot more work. So along with the problems with the book, the direction, also by Murphy and Mushin, is, well, unimaginative. Choreography is, does something to liven it up, Kelly Akers. But the biographies of these two directors emphasises screenwriting and direction. So perhaps that's the problem, that I don't know, perhaps I'm talking through my hat, that they may not have sufficient musical theatre direction experience. But the attempt to sort of jam in the issues about the crippling taxes and causing the poverty and deprivation of the commoners, and Ella on this quest against class and power and taking a feminist approach to this and trying to trigger rebellion, they never come to fruition. She finds the prince, indulgent and weak and a spoilt brat, but she still falls head over heels with him from the moment she meets him and pursues him on the pretext that she wants to urge him to change things. Look, Verity Hunt-Ballard is charismatic as the villainess, Ella's stepmother. Her song My Time's wonderful. Lucy Durack also as Miss Madrina, the fairy godmother, although the fairy godmother barely makes an appearance, and her main song, You Are the One, would make a much more interesting love duet, or more logical love duet between the leads. It's crying out for more magic, essentially, this show, and maybe a big red pen and some other things. Another thing just to mention, keep an eye out for La Mama on screen. And that's all from me.
Kate Herbert, thank you very much for telling it like it is. You're listening to Arts Weekly here on 3MBS.